Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for The Mandalorian Episode 4. And yeah, 4 episodes in, this continues to be a very, very impressive show. This episode especially I thought was a good sort of kind of solo plot episode where, yes, we dealt with the overall plot in the sense of like the episode started arriving at this planet to find a place to keep Baby Yoda safe, and by the end we have to move on because it's revealed it's not safe. There's no just finding a place and hiding out because they're being tracked. It doesn't work to just go to an isolated area. That was the main plot focus of the episode. But I like that we were able to sort of have a standalone plot here of helping out the people of this planet dealing with their own problem with raiders. It helped to sort of highlight again the sort of that the Mandalorian is like a good person at heart, as much as like he's a former bounty hunter, part of the guild and stuff like that, and he tries to sort of stay out of things and maintain that sort of tough exterior. He and Cara Dune in this episode also both are willing to help in that, like, they accept the money, but like they do this pretty heavy, crazy job for a pretty low amount of money and put a lot of time and effort into helping these people. And I just thought it was really good because it reminded me, of course, of episodes of Clone Wars that we got that were like this. I think the Onderon arc was, I think, one time we especially saw it, and we might have seen it once or twice before as well. The Lerman, I think, as well, early on in the Clone Wars, it was another one where it was kind of like that, not exactly, but just this idea of like taken away from a huge support from an army. It's just a bunch of people, just a couple of people helping like farmers effectively to defend themselves from a bigger threat. And it wasn't this huge scale battle, but it was just a group of farmers against a group of raiders, and the raiders have an ATST, which is one of those smaller walkers, the two-legged walkers. It's not a four-legged walker giant thing, but they made that into a huge threat because like the Mandalorian is very skilled, and he has all these kind of technology and weaponry, but they're not making him out to be a Jedi again, in that like when the Mandalorian and Cara Dune have their sort of fight at the start, they both sort of get the advantage over each other over the course of the episode. You almost get the idea that like Cara Dune is maybe more skilled a little bit, that it, like, if the Mandalorian wasn't wearing his armor or took the helmet off, it would have been a completely kind of stalemate type situation. That he's good, but he's not perfect. He's not a Jedi. He can't be that good. So an ATST is a boss of this episode. Like it's a huge thing that you have to put a lot of planning in to take down. Whereas in a Clone Wars episode, that's bring up the guy with the rocket launcher. It's throw a bunch of grenades at it and like you deal with that. That an ATST in an episode of the Clone Wars isn't much of a threat, but here it is, because it's just a bunch of farmers who have like are trained to use some spears. A couple of them trained to use blasters, and the only people who are skilled at fighting are Cara Dune, the Mandalorian, and Omera, the woman with the child that we get introduced to here, and the kind of love interest in a way of the Mandalorian of this episode. I thought that was interesting as well, just that they got that across from the few scenes of her, that like she knows like what to do. She's like capable in so many ways. Just the fact that she knew what to do in terms of to keep herself and her daughter alive in that situation. She knows how to fire the blaster. There's a tease of like a history there for her that she kind of we kind of are interested to kind of learn more about her, to know how she knows how to handle herself so well, and that like maybe it is just as simple as just she trained a little bit somewhere else before she came here, or something like that. But just they get across the idea that she's a bit different than anyone else. But yeah, it's like 3 sort of skilled people and a bunch of kind of random people versus like a band of raiders and an ATST. And I love the tactics that they brought into this episode of like they knew it was going to be a huge problem. none of the weapons that they have are going to be able to just take this thing out from the ground. Not even the Mandalorian sniper rifle is going to be able to like particularly damage it from the outside, or do the usual tactics of just like breaking the legs. They could shoot at it all day and they probably wouldn't take it down just by shooting the legs. So they had to, use the ground, the terrain to their advantage. So they dig a big trench and basically force the battlefield so that the ATST has to walk over that trench. And that's how they take it out, because if you knock one of these things over, it's not getting back up pretty much. Or at the very least, you have a lot of time to really do some damage to it while it's on the ground. In that, like, okay, the Mandalorian ends up like properly taking it out by throwing a thermal detonator inside it, and getting across the idea that it sort of chain reacts everything together, and that if he had just thrown the thermal detonator like at the outside of it, it probably wouldn't have done anywhere near as much damage. Like, unless he got some sort of a perfect shot where like he attached the thermal detonator to like the knee joint, he probably wouldn't have been able to like actually just defeat it on the outside. So I thought they did a good job at explaining, why the need to do all this other stuff to like knock it over, then take it out. And just the kind of heat of the battle of just like all these inexperienced farmers who you've grown to care about, the fact that they're ultimately all protecting like the kids are protecting Baby Yoda, that if that ATST gets through, all of them are at risk. And they just did a good job at making Cara Dune and the Mandalorian like care for this group of people, and especially with the kind of subtle, more kind of romance plot of, there is an option here where like if it turns out to be a place the Mandalorian likes, Baby Yoda likes it here, they love him here, this could be the place to hide out. But that's where the end of the episode comes in, with the fact that, of course, the Bounty Hunter Guild is still after them. They can still track the child, Baby Yoda, using the tracking fobs, and that brings the sort of dream scenario here to a close, that's not going to work. It just is not going to work. They are going to have to just either stay on the run for a very long time until the Bounty Hunter Guild gives up, or find a way to stop the tracker from working, which is where, like, I think a plot point that they're going to have to address coming up soon is how those tracking fobs work, because it seems kind of like this almost like overpowered like sensing ability of those things, and that like, that would suggest that there's some sort of a like tracking beacon type thing in Baby Yoda, which would suggest that like someone put that there and was aware that they wanted the bounty on Baby Yoda, and it's just unclear about like how exactly it works, in that like if a new bounty goes out, does that immediately suggest that someone implanted a beacon on that bounty? I don't really think so. I think there has to be a sense that like it's just this person, you track them, but like then how does the tracker work? Because in some cases it works based off like last known location or something like that. So in this case, like, how were they tracked so heavily? Because like, I think when the Mandalorian went after Baby Yoda first, he did have to sort of get information about sort of like the last known information, and then the tracker worked sort of up close. So it overall, I suppose, suggested that they were being tracked sort of like the whole way. But again, we still need to learn the full scope of how that works, and that will they need to take some sort of a tracking beacon out of Baby Yoda to make it work, or will they have to go to like the Bounty Hunter Guild like headquarters and just destroy like the data bank or something like that has all their bounties in it? Is that a way to erase the data of how to track Baby Yoda? Because there has to be a way to be free of the Bounty Hunter Guild ultimately, but how do you do that is the question. The other thing in this episode was more clarification about the whole I never take off my helmet thing, in that it was never a part of the Mandalorian culture in like the Clone Wars, or I think even Rebels, because of course Sabine took her helmet off all the time. So clearly this is a new thing that they've introduced in the aftermath of like the Great Purge and so on. And what I believe it's effectively doing is they're turning the kind of George Lucas canon Mandalorian stuff now in this new era more into the Mandalorian stuff as it was sort of in the EU. I don't think it's exactly the same, but it's growing into something much more like that. I know a lot of people were not happy with the way like the Clone Wars went with regards to revealing this is how Mandalorians work, and they wanted it to be more like the Karen Travis novels. I think that's the direction they're sort of heading now, in that this new way it works, you know, the whole this is the way, the code, never take off your helmet, you gradually build up your armor. That feels much more like the Mandalorian sort of code type stuff that was in like the novels and so on. So I like that seems like a Dave Filoni type of thing that he would do, of like he directly would know about the feedback of hardcore fans to the way that George Lucas wanted the Mandalorians portrayed in canon, and of course he'd probably want to bring it back in that way, and it makes complete sense. You know, change up their culture given that, you know, it didn't work on the home planet in the way it was working, and they have to bring in people who aren't from Mandalore and so on. So I like that, in that like what they confirmed here, of course, was that he does take the helmet off, but he only does it when he's alone, which obviously suggests that, you know, he only eats when he's on his own and stuff like that. And it confirms to us that he's never shown his face to anyone since he put the helmet on the first time. He's never taken that helmet off in the presence of someone else. And it immediately sets up that when he does that, when another character sees his face, I suppose when the audience sees his face, it's going to be a big moment, because there has to be an emotional reason as to why. Right now he is still committed to the Mandalorian way. Will there be something that tempts him sort of away from that brings out more of maybe his own ideals? And I think we were beginning to see that here with Omera, in that he was this close to sort of letting her take his helmet off and accept, you know, living there with her, you know, starting a relationship with her, having that sort of peaceful existence here, getting to watch, you know, the child, Baby Yoda, sort of grow up in a happy location. But he stopped at the last minute because I suppose there's more for him to do. And this is where we have to get into, I suppose, like, what is his goal now? Of course he wants to protect the child, but does he have a goal beyond that? Is there something within Mandalorian culture that he's trying to accomplish? Does he ultimately want revenge against someone in particular based on what happened in the past? Or is that all gone because of the Clone Wars and how it came to an end? They're the sort of questions that we have here. That there's some lingering thing left that he can't accept settling down now. That it's not just about protecting the child, and that's where I think they've done a good job at like giving you some core character traits of the Mandalorian, but ultimately holding back on a lot of what his like overall goals are, and that's where the fact that him not speaking so much comes into play. The fact that we don't get to see him, you know, just take off the helmet all the time, means that we have to rely on just body language and then like tilts of the head and stuff like that to get any sort of expressions out of him, which I think works really, really well. As for, I suppose, Baby Yoda himself, there was some fun moments here. He had a little bit of an interaction with a Loth cat at the start, which was a cool sort of Star Wars Rebels reference. That was sort of like a key animal in like the early stages of Rebels. The kids really liked him, and the kids basically had the same reaction as basically the entire fan base to Baby Yoda. Just everyone loves Baby Yoda. Of course everyone loves Yoda. And other than that, I think the main thing is just the fact that he's not being hidden. The Mandalorian doesn't keep the child hidden when he goes out. And so he gets a lot of looks, Baby Yoda, but no one seems to know necessarily what way to view him, in that he's neither treated as being, like, by every single character as being like, oh, it's one of those rare species that we don't hear about too much. They're just like, it's an alien. I don't know what the name of that alien species is, but he's just an alien. It's that sort of thing. So is the importance of this kind of creature only really to those sort of who are very knowledgeable about the different alien species, that someone like a Dr. Pershing, who probably knows a lot about like all the species of the galaxy, he would know that this is rare, whereas I suppose in like a more isolated planet like this, out in the middle of nowhere, they're maybe not used to seeing more than maybe a handful of different alien races, so them seeing a new one isn't anything particularly rare, and that's why there's no huge reaction. And so it's more of a thing of like, you need to sort of know why Baby Yoda is important to kind of treat him as being important. And that's where like they're doing, I think, an okay job at like continuing to tease out the mystery of like, what is the name of this species, what is the home planet of this species, and any like traits that are specifically related to it. That they're not, the second we found out that like Baby Yoda was going to be in the show for like the entire run, basically, they didn't immediately jump on, reveal this, then this, then this. They're holding out on that because they know it's like super important information, that the second that they say what the species name is, it's going to be like, you know, discussed all over the place. So they're waiting for like a good moment to reveal it and have it not just turn into like a sort of Wikipedia article on the species type thing. But I think a lot of people ultimately do want to know those type of things. I think like we're far enough into Star Wars now where I don't think this needs to be that much of a rare thing. Like, this is the canonical third member of Yoda species. We have Yoda, we have Yaddle, now we have Baby Yoda, or the child. We should probably get to a point where we know a little bit more about this species. I suppose one of the big things they'll probably get to eventually will just be giving the child a name. I assume the Mandalorian probably at some point will decide to give it a name, and that will be a big moment. Because I think we're all waiting for like the merchandise to come out, but I think the merchandise is going to be a bit weird in terms of like, is all the merchandise going to come out and really just say the child on it? Like, that's just going to be what all the merchandise is referred to it as? Because they're not going to call it Baby Yoda as much as the fandom's calling it Baby Yoda. It just doesn't make sense for that to be the name on any sort of like official merchandise, because it's not Yoda. Like, unless they do some wild reveal, it's not going to be Baby Yoda. Anything else in the episode? Just that, you know, I continue to like the portrayal of the Mandalorian, that he's not this, you know, perfect fighter. That a lot of the times he's just super, super scrappy in these fights. Like, he'll get hit, he'll get thrown into the wall, but like the fact is that like he'll come right back up. Like, he's tough and he'll continue to fight, and he has all the typical sort of Mandalorian tricks. That you can get behind that, because he's not just relentlessly like defeating everyone he comes across. That's where like the Mudhorn fight was sort of so interesting, that ultimately he accepts that was sort of a dishonorable victory over that animal, because Baby Yoda had to use the Force to help him. And which again, like, when are we going to get more Force stuff, and like, and is anyone going to talk about that? And that's where like there's a lot of potential going forward, in that like, if the Mandalorian comes across a character who is sort of Force sensitive, or knows stuff about the Force and the Jedi, and sees Baby Yoda doing that sort of stuff, that's maybe when we might be able to get some extra information. Because inevitably, like, Yoda has to be considered one of the like a kind of household name in a way in the Star Wars galaxy, even, you know, in this time period. So inevitably someone's going to recognize that this is the same species as Yoda, and we'll probably get a Yoda reference at some point, and someone will sort of connect those dots, and that'll be kind of fun when it happens. But yeah, I'm just gonna end the review there, and just be like, this continues to be a great show. I think the more and more episodes we go through, the more and more like that creative team of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau go up in everyone's estimations. Like, there's a reason people have been sort of saying for a while that like, you probably should be getting like one of those or both of them in the sort of in control of Star Wars, as like the new George Lucas type thing in a way, because they really seem to know what they're doing. They really seem to get what fans want, in that like, how would the sequel trilogy be if it was these two doing it, and that sort of thing. And with Dave Filoni especially, like, let's not forget, like, the last season of the Clone Wars is going to be coming out in the next couple of months as well, and that before we even knew what exactly the Mandalorian was, that's what had everyone hyped. So Dave Filoni, like, I think we're gonna get some really amazing final Clone Wars episodes. I think Dave Filoni is going to be considered, like, you know, this guy needs to be given a huge position within Star Wars going forward because of his work here on the Clone Wars, and then especially what the last Clone Wars arc is going to be, because I think the Clone Wars arc will give us some good context for what's going on in The Mandalorian, because I think the big final arc is very heavily related to the Mandalorians and stuff like that, because it's on Mandalore. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 4 of The Mandalorian. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.